listening to the Up and Under podcast, starting in 3, 2, 1.
Yo, what's up, guys? Welcome into the Up and Under podcast. I'm your host, Hani. Joined with me remotely is Zeeshan.
Yo.
Alright, man, as promised, if you haven't checked out last week's episode, definitely check it out. We basically broke down our predictions and our picks for our Western Conference All-Stars for this season. So, as promised, we're here to bring you guys our predictions for the Eastern Conference All-Stars. And, man, it's a weird year for the East where this year picking the All-Stars, man, it was tough, man. It was not an easy thing for us to do because there's a lot more star power in the Eastern Conference. Thanks, Brooklyn. And it just means that like there were so many instances where like you can rank a player higher, you can rank a player lower, and so yeah, the snubs part of this is gonna be interesting for sure.
Yeah, man. Like we were talking about last episode when we were breaking down our Western Conference All-Stars. So yeah, once again, make sure to check out that episode if you haven't already. But when we were breaking down our Western Conference All-Stars, we were like, yo, this is really hard to do, man. Like, the Western Conference All-Star, the competition was crazy. I think we might have anticipated that the Eastern Conference would be easier, and I think we were very wrong on that. And you guys are going to see that in terms of the notable snubs category that we're going to give out. There's a lot of names over here that you could easily make the case for to be an all-star, but just for us, like, I mean, there's only 12 spots,
yeah.
You can't really do nothing about it.
I mean, I'll say this though before we start, like, these are entirely our predictions. This is who we would pick for all-stars just based on what we've seen. So again, even like when we bring up the snubs later on in the episode, any one of those players has an all-star case, which is why we brought them up. But for us, the players who we feel deserve the spots are the ones we're going to be mentioning in this episode. So without any further ado, man, we got a lot of players to cover. So let's jump right in to our starters for the Eastern Conference All-Stars.
Yeah. Also, once again, too, the coaches will be selecting the bench, so it's pretty much entirely up to them and how they feel.
Yeah.
Right. But starting us off with the guard spots for the Eastern Conference, the starting lineup. The first player we have at the guard spot is James Harden himself, right? And you were alluding to this right before we started this episode. Like, the East is in a tougher spot because of the fact that James Harden went to East. Yeah. So now he was a lock for the Western Conference. Now he takes up an Eastern Conference spot. So currently right now he's averaging 23.9 points a game, 7.3 rebounds, 11.3 assists, leading the league on field goal percentage and 38% from three. Also for the second seeded Brooklyn Nets, who are 17 and 12 right now. Again, as I talked about, James Harden pretty much stole an Eastern Conference spot instead of having his usual Western Conference spot. But, people say, the beginning of the season didn't help his case, and it didn't for sure. But, at the end of the day, he was still putting up all-star worthy numbers in the beginning of the season, right? He was still putting up those numbers, even though they weren't really leading to results. He was still putting up those numbers. And again, since he's come to Brooklyn, he has embraced the role. As Kyrie recently said, James Harden is the point guard of this team. And James Harden has fully embraced that role in terms of taking much less shots and distributing the ball a lot more. As I said, he's leading the league with 11 assists a game. He's fully embraced that point guard role, which I think a lot of people had questions about. Look at his Houston days, he was able to expand that part of his game a lot. It's just that he had to carry such a load offensively in terms of scoring the ball as well that, his passing got overshadowed. But he is clearly one of the best passers in the league. And now with two scorers who are looking to score 30 points a game next to him, as he said, he doesn't have to carry the load offensively anymore. Now he can look to get guys like KD, Kyrie, Joe Harris, other players like that. He can try to get them involved. So James Harden is definitely a lock for the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, I mean, it's no surprise that James Harden has been one of the best players in this league for quite some time now. We've talked about him a lot this season, most notably because of how he stunk it up on his way out of Houston. But yeah, you said it best. He basically stole an Eastern Conference starting spot in the All-Star game because of the fact that he's James Harden. And sure, the scoring numbers are down, but what you're hearing from a lot of people when this Brooklyn Big Three was formed was one of these three guys was gonna have to sacrifice. And you know what? I think the best, I don't know where I heard it from, but KD has a ring. Kyrie has a ring. The guy who doesn't have a ring is James Harden. So if there's any one of those three guys that has to sacrifice if he wants to win, one of these, is James Harden. And you're seeing it now where, he's embracing that facilitator role, which again, he's always been capable of being a solid facilitator, like a great facilitator, it's from his Houston days. It's just that in Houston, he was his whole team's offense. Now in Brooklyn, he doesn't have to be that. And you're just seeing that, he can really adapt his game as not only being a great scorer, but a great playmaker as well. So although I personally feel that because he was traded midway through the season, is it really fair that he's considered an East All-Star? To me, I don't know. It kind of takes an opportunity away from a guy who's been doing it from the beginning of the season. But you can't deny James Harden is a lock for an All-Star. So
yeah, I mean the thing is though he did get traded. What was it, like 8 games into the season? So
yeah.
By the time the All-Star game rolls around, he'd have played a large majority of the season in the Eastern Conference. So that is why we have James Harden as one of our Eastern Conference guards. The next guy we have in our Eastern Conference guard spot for the starting lineup is Bradley Beal. Now, Bradley Beal is averaging 33.1 points a game, leading the league in scoring, 5.2 rebounds and 4.4 assists, shooting 47.6% from the field and 34% from three. The unfortunate part about Bradley Beal's individual success is that his team has had no success whatsoever. As they're currently the 14th seed in the Eastern Conference with a record of 8-17. Now, Bradley Beal, we put him in the starting lineup just because, first of all, I think we kind of felt bad for him after the year he had last year. And also, again, he is leading the league in scoring. He's having to backpack. Westbrook, I think Westbrook, his failures have been overstated in terms of this season because of the fact that Washington is clearly better with him there by a wide margin. But unfortunately, again, you're dealing with, I think we've said it, after Jim Boylan was fired last year, I think Scott Brooks might be the worst coach in the NBA. I don't know how he still has his job.
I mean, Luke Walton's there.
Luke Walton also.
He's there.
He definitely has a argument to be the worst coach in the league. But Scott Brooks is definitely one of the worst coaches in the league. He should have been fired a long time ago, to be honest. Again, I don't want him. I'm not trying to axe people from the job, but it's a result-driven league, right? Scott Brooks is garbage as a coach. Let's be real. So Bradley Beal's kind of had to backpack, and again, as we said, it comes down to the coaches. Well, unless the fans are able to put him in the starting lineup, which, again, I don't, because 50% of it is fans, right? We talked about last week, the fan vote was reduced. So only 50% will be the fans vote. Now, if the players put him into the starting lineup, then there'll be a different case. But if he doesn't make the starting lineup, will the coaches vote him into the All-Star game? Because we saw last year, the coaches did not vote him into the All-Star game, nor did the press give him an All-NBA selection, right? Despite the fact that he was having a very similar season last year. So Bradley Beal is in a very interesting spot. I think a lot of fans want him to be in the All-Star game. They're rooting for him. But again, the coaches are more, driven than fans are, right? Fans are more individually driven, whereas coaches are more, they put more emphasis on the team success. And Bradley Beal has had no team success since, him and John Wall were making the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'll say this. Like, I think we've been very supportive of Bradley Beal and kind of sympathize with the situation in Washington where, that team, that organization hasn't been able to do anything right. He's been the bright spot. He's been carrying this team. And I think, if you're leading the league in scoring and being one of the top 3 in scoring in back-to-back consecutive years now for Bradley Beal, you should be, rewarded for your play. Now, I don't think he should be punished for being in that situation that he's in. And I've watched a bunch of Washington Wizard games highlights, and I've kind of noticed what's going on, And it's not, we mentioned it before about the Wizards. It's not about their lack or inability to score. It's their inability to defend that kills them. They can keep up with anybody. We saw them. They beat Brooklyn by scoring 140 points. So, but the way they were,
I think it was like 148 or something.
Yeah, it was some crazy big number. But when they beat Brooklyn, it was all based off their offense. They were able to outscore Brooklyn, who was also a pretty very bad defensive team, and that's how they were able to win that game. But you can see that's not a sustainable game plan, and I don't think all of that's on Bradley Beal. A lot of that has to do with Scott Brooks just not putting his guys in position to succeed. His team just not, producing enough. And again, there's blame to go around, but I don't think, especially for something like an All-Star selection, which is dictated on your individual performance. I think you got to give it to the guy. He's leading the league in scoring. He's showing why he's one of the best, one of the best shooting guards in this league, one of the best shooting guards in the Eastern Conference for sure. And I think we feel that he should be a lock for a starting spot in the All-Star game.
I think to your point, also to add on to your point about the Washington Wizards' lack of defense, I think that could also hurt him in terms of his All-Star case, right? Because of the fact that Bradley Beal, we know, is a subpar defender, right? Now a lot of that probably has to do with him carrying the load on offense, but he is a subpar defender nonetheless, and coaches look at that, so coaches might just not feel that and might not vote him into the All-Star game. Again, as I said, Bradley Beal, had a terrible year in terms of individual achievements last year, despite the fact of, his individual success on the court. So we'll see whether, that trend repeats again this year, or, people finally, decide to give him some of those individual accolades. But moving on to the front court spots for the Eastern Conference All-Star starters, we have our first front court player, Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant is officially back. There was some doubts of whether he could regain his former form. I don't even think he's fully there all the way. But the fact that he's averaging right now 29 points a game, 7.3 rebounds, 5.3 assists, shooting 42.4% from the field, 43.4% from three. That's just classic KD. Like KD is arguably the greatest offensive talent of all time. And him, Kyrie and James Harden on the Brooklyn Nets, it hasn't been perfect, obviously, but the potential for them is sky high in terms of the fact that they can easily win a championship just based on their offensive talent alone. And KD contributes a large part of that as Brooklyn's first or second option.
Yeah, I think for us, the starting front court for the East was probably the easiest for us because we just knew these three guys are a lock, and one of them is Kevin Durant. I mean, he would have been a lock in the Western Conference, and he's a lock in the Eastern Conference. And he, after coming off of that injury that kept him out for well over a year, he's back and he's performing like Kevin Durant. He's a fantastic player, can score from anywhere, can score in any type of way. He's still I think he's still. Can you argue he's an underrated defender? Because not many people think.
I mean, in Golden State, he was, I think, at his peak defensively in terms of the fact that he was garnering Defensive Player of the Year votes. Obviously, I don't think he's at that level right now, and probably for good reason in terms of the fact that he did come off a Achilles injury. So I don't know if he'll ever get to that, part of his, that peak again. But he did learn a lot of defensive principles and defensive habits from Golden State. So at the very least, he's more in tune and has more attention to detail than on defense than he did, for example, in his OKC days. So
okay, so he's still a good player on both ends of the floor, but offensively, man, he can do it all. And I think a lot of a lot of the reason why people are putting Brooklyn in the championship picture is Kevin Durant because of how great he is, and it's a no brainer. He's arguably the second, maybe third best player in the world right now, behind LeBron, and he's been that for the last like decade plus right now. So no shocker, Kevin Durant is a starter in the All-Star game, man. It's no surprise at all.
Yeah, and although again we do hate on KD a lot, but you gotta love the fact that he's looking back to his former self. Obviously, we don't want no injuries on any players, and the fact that he's looked like he's regained his form off of Achilles injury, especially. It's a great thing for basketball for sure, for
Yeah.
sure. Next up to our next front court player in the Eastern Conference, it is Giannis Antetokounmpo, averaging 28 points, 11.5 rebounds, 5.7 assists per game, shooting 56.3% from the field. Unfortunately, the three-point shot is 28%, free throw percentage 63.8. Um, for the Milwaukee Bucks, who are currently the third seed in the Eastern Conference. Now, again, I think the hype around Giannis kind of died down after his two MVP seasons, for the past 2 years. But and again, people want to, I think, at this stage of his career, critique him a lot more because of the fact that now he is older. He's on that superstar level now, so people are going to critique him at the superstar level, and rightfully so. We're talking about his shooting. His shooting is terrible. His free throw percentage has gone down every year. It's still not good at all. He's still, a liability on that aspect in crunch time. So he does have a lot of problems. But, Giannis is he automatically makes your team a top team in the NBA. He's automatically an MVP candidate every year. And, he is one of the greatest talents the league has ever seen, right? In terms of being 7 feet plus, and being able to move and run around the court the way he does. We've very rarely seen players like him. And, so despite all the criticism that he's faced this season, he's still a lock for the, starting lineup for the All-Star game.
Yeah, I mean, I watched Giannis tonight, and the biggest takeaway I had, he's probably one of the hardest players to defend in today's game, man. Not only is he big, but he's fast, he's strong, and when he comes downhill, he's basically unstoppable to stop, to guard, and he just, a lot of that just comes with his self development. The fact that when he came into the league, he was nothing. He was, a skinny kid from Greece, and he built himself up into what he is. So that's always been great about Giannis. And again,
The work ethic.
yeah, the work ethic has been huge with Giannis. And again, like you said, his hype has definitely died down, and I think the criticism has definitely increased. But you can't deny the fact that he's still among the best players in this league. And his team is continuously keeps winning, which is the big thing. He's a superstar player that puts up his superstar numbers, but his team is also performing at a high level, which is what you want. Which as an organization. And one more thing about Giannis, you didn't mention about his shooting. Well, he hit like 2 or 3 threes tonight against the Raptors, and these were pull-up threes, contested looks, man. So although the shots don't go down consistently, he's not afraid to take them, and the shots that he is taking shows growth, at least from what I've seen of Giannis.
Yeah, I mean, he's never afraid to take those shots. It's just, honestly, it's come to the point of whether you should take those shots or not anymore.
The free throw shot, the free throw shooting, I don't know what happened there.
I mean, again, as I said, I think I've said it before too, like the bigger players can never shoot free throws properly because their body just doesn't translate. But in terms of Milwaukee, obviously people will point to the fact that they have been worse this year. But they've integrated a lot of new players. There's a lot of roster turnover, and also the fact that Mike Budenholzer is trying to implement a whole new, a bunch of new systems and principles into the team, in the hopes that they can finally get over the hump in the playoffs. So obviously that's kind of taint the Bucks record a bit from last year. But they still are top three seed in the East. And they're still a team that you don't want to see in the playoffs for sure.
No. Yeah.
Moving on to our final front court player in the Eastern Conference starting lineup, we have Joel Embiid averaging 29.6 points a game, 10.8 rebounds, shooting 54.3% from the field and 40% from three. For the Eastern Conference leading Philadelphia 76ers, standing at an 18-10 record. Now, again, as I talked about last episode with Nikola Jokic, the other front runner for the MVP is Joel Embiid himself. Joel Embiid seems to have taken that next step forward in his development in terms of the fact that now he looks like a legitimate superstar. We always had criticism of him before, and I think a lot of people did before as well, of whether, there's always times where he would fade in and out of games, even though he's arguably one of the greatest talents in the league. But this year he seems to have found another gear. As I said, he's hitting 40% of his threes, which is absolutely crazy. His mid range was always money. Now with this 3-point shooting, that mid range opens up a lot more. He's one of the best face-up players in the post today. And, with his mid-range jumper, his ability to back down in the post, his footwork, Joel Embiid is a top 2 center in the league with Nikola Jokic. As I said, they are both front runners for MVP right now. And he's been amazing to watch, honestly. Like, I've watched a couple of 76ers games, and there's a reason why they're the first seed right now. And a large part of it has to do with Joel Embiid and his all-around brilliance. As I said, and obviously the defense is still there.
Look, we've all known one thing about Joel Embiid. He has the potential to be the best center in this league, the best big in this league. And the only thing about Joel was always about him staying healthy and staying in shape for a full season. And I think this season you've seen he hasn't had a big injury or anything of that, nothing major at least reported up to this date, and that has helped him. And he's come in. He looks great. He looks in good shape. He's hitting the 3-point shot. He's posting up. He's still bringing the energy on the defensive end, and his team is winning, which is especially a great thing for the Sixers, an organization that has all the talent to be a championship team, but they just need to produce to get over the hump. And I think Joel playing at this high level is definitely a great step for them. And he's arguably the front runner. Like, again, I did not see this coming for Joel Embiid. I didn't see this level of production out of him, and I think he's definitely in the MVP conversation, if not the front runner in some people's mind, and rightfully so. I mean, his team's doing well. He's doing great. It's just a matter of whether or not he's going to keep it up. But as far as all-star conversations are concerned, he's the best center in the Eastern Conference, and hands down deserves a starting position.
Yeah, for sure. So those were our Eastern Conference All-Star starters. Tell us what you think. Do you guys agree or disagree? Who would you guys have in your starting lineup? Moving on to the bench, and we're probably gonna have to quicken it up a bit. But moving on to the bench for the Eastern Conference, we have our first guard. And as you alluded to before, with James Harden taking up a spot in the Eastern Conference, now the Brooklyn Nets have 3 All-Star players on the roster. For our first guard spot, we have Kyrie Irving averaging 28.3 points a game, 5.7 assists, shooting 53.4% from the field, 44.2% from 3. Absolutely crazy. And of course, is a standard 90+% from the free throw line. And again, for the second seeded Brooklyn Nets, Kyrie Irving has been a target of criticism also from us. We have criticized him also, for some of the stuff that he's done throughout the season. It's that line with Kyrie Irving. Sometimes he does some stuff that are questionable, but we've never, questioned his genuineness and his intent to be a good guy. Everyone knows that he's a great guy. There's a reason why he's, a vice president in the NBA. There's a reason why everyone in the league, for the most part, loves him. He's a great guy. It's just he does some questionable things from time to time, but on-court production. He is one of the greatest talents we have ever seen. He's, in my opinion, the greatest ball handler of all time. And he is one of the greatest finishers of all time too, especially from the guard spot. I think he has the greatest layup package of all time in terms of, if you look at his highlights, the crazy finishes that he has. I haven't seen anybody make better layups than he does. And again, people have talked about it. He is one of the greatest. He's one of the most skilled players of all time in terms of only being, was he 6'2", 6'3", but the amount of skill that he does, ball handling, his shooting, his post game, eating, it's insane what he can do with the ball. And so, him leading the Brooklyn Nets as one of their top two scorers in the Eastern Conference definitely makes him a lock for the All-Star game.
Yeah, I think a lot of our criticism of Kyrie has been mainly off the court issues where, he's just been distant or hasn't been on the team or has said something that's very asinine, or his criticism of the media, there's a lot of things about Kyrie Irving that really, at least for me, put me in a negative perspective. But there's no denying his on-court product is amazing. Again, you said it. He's arguably the greatest ball handler of all time. I'd put him right up there with Allen Iverson. Now, I don't know which one I would prefer. I think the old-headed me is gonna probably take AI, but Kyrie's.
Well, AI himself said Kyrie's better.
Hey man, I'll still say this: Kyrie is still amazing what he can do with the ball, and yeah. Again, I think one other thing is that now that he's in a situation, now that he's gotten more time to play with James Harden, he no longer has to worry about the playmaking responsibilities, which, to be honest, was never really Kyrie's game. He can just focus on what he does best, which is score the basketball and be a great option for his team night in and night out. So no surprise that Kyrie Irving is an all-star. Now, does it still bother me that Brooklyn gets 3 all-stars? Yes, it does. But it was very difficult for us to leave Kyrie Irving off this list.
Yeah. So that was our first guard spot for the bench. Our next guard spot for the bench is Jaylen Brown from the Boston Celtics, who are currently kind of underperforming, but they still are the 4th seed at a 14-13 record. But Jaylen Brown has been absolutely amazing. To be honest, he's averaging 26 points a game, 5.7 rebounds, shooting 51.3% from the field, 40.9% from three. One of the biggest things, right? He's taken that next step in his development. He's been good from three, since the beginning of his career, but now he is a legit shooter from three. And he's now averaging 26 points a game. We saw the potential that he had, especially last season when I think he started to really break out. And we saw the potential that he could have as a 1-2 punch next to Jason Tatum. And now you're really seeing it. He definitely deserves that contract. I think we'll go back, a couple of years ago when we had some criticisms of that contract. We definitely took an L on that because now he definitely deserves a max contract. And he's still very young, man. The fact that he's only gonna get better from here on out, and he hasn't even hit his prime yet is what's insane, right? Him and Jason Tatum. The fact that they're still so young, and already producing at the rate that they are now. Is Boston? I think Boston is missing maybe one big piece for their team in terms of championship aspirations. But Jaylen Brown himself as an individual has taken that next step forward. And Boston, I think with those two, and Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, can only go higher up from here on out.
Yeah, man. I mean, I think we all knew Jaylen Brown was a great player. Solid, great amazing defender. Can shoot the three, a quintessential 3-and-D guy that a lot of teams would want. But I think the biggest thing with Jaylen Brown has just been his offensive improvement, man, where you can just see the 3-point shots gotten even better this season. The ability to score off the dribble is better. His dribble penetration has been far better than it has been in his career. His mid-range game has been something that he's definitely been working on. And he's just a more confident all-round player, and he's still giving it to you giving you that amazing defense on that side of the ball. So we've spoken about Jaylen Brown a lot, but the numbers speak for itself. The fact that his team is winning consistently, and as a Raptor fan, that pains me to say because Boston has been a thorn in our side this season. But there's no denying he's a fantastic player, and we think he definitely deserves his first All-Star selection this season. So yeah, Jaylen Brown definitely should be an All-Star.
Again, a 7-point increase from 2019 to 2020, and then a 6-point increase this season. So
constant
he's been
improvement.
Absolutely amazing. Constant improvement for sure. Speaking of the Boston Celtics and Jaylen Brown's running mate, we have Jason Tatum occupying our first front court spot on the bench in the Eastern Conference. Now, Jason Tatum is averaging 25.6 points a game, 7.1 rebounds, 4.5 assists, shooting 45% from the field and 40.7% from three. Now, Jason Tatum, again, he's being talked about to death because of the fact that he is one of the best young up-and-coming players, but rightfully so. He is, I think he took that jump in the second half of last season, where we, even as Raptors fans, we were like, yo, this guy is going absolutely crazy, man. Now this year, I think he hasn't been as good as that second stretch of last season. Primarily, I think a large part of that can be attributed to the fact that, and he's even talked about it too, his COVID recovery. It's affected him. He's talked about his breathing is still not proper, right? He's still running up and down the court and gets pretty gassed, right? So, a large part of that has to do with the COVID issue. And, obviously probably a lot of other players are dealing with that, especially players who are struggling. But Jason Tatum has been absolutely amazing throughout his career, and especially now in the past year and a half, where he's taken that next step forward. And, especially if he keeps going on this trajectory, if he takes another jump in his development, man, he can easily be a 28-point game scorer on a nightly basis, leading his team to, the Eastern Conference Finals and the NBA Finals.
Yeah, man. Like we've said it a lot. Jason Tatum is a very, very good player, man. And Danny Ainge, committed highway robbery, stealing him away from the Philadelphia 76ers in that draft trade. And yeah, he's just been fantastic. I mean, again, we were arguing that we wouldn't put Jason Tatum on this list because of the fact that he has missed some games, and Jaylen Brown has been kind of carrying while Jason Tatum has been out. But you look at the numbers and you just look at the production on the court, and it's still very obvious that Jason Tatum is still among the best players in this league. And and he's still so very young that the fact that he hasn't even hit his prime yet is scary for not only us as Raptor fans, but I think the entire league too. So yeah, it was difficult for us to not put Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum on this All-Star list.
Yeah, for sure. Next up, our next front court player in the Eastern Conference is Domantas Sabonis. Now, Domantas Sabonis plays for the Indiana Pacers, who are currently the 5th seed at a 14-14 record. Now, the Pacers did have a hot start to the season, especially fueled by their, quote-unquote big three of Malcolm Brogdon, Domantas Sabonis, and Miles Turner. Since then, they've cooled down significantly. I think they've regressed to the average of what a lot of people were expecting them to be. But, Domantas Sabonis has a yearly All-Star selection. Especially, what makes this good is the fact that I think in OKC, where he was very underutilized, and they tried to make him a spot-up shooter when that was never his game. And now seeing him in Indiana, where he's been able to flourish in the same type of role that, his dad had, right? As that kind of point forward, running the offense, scoring in the post, facilitating in the high post, and on the three-point line. Domantas Sabonis has been great. He's averaging 21 points a game, 11.4 rebounds, 5.6 assists. Very impressive as a power forward or center. Shooting 33% from the field and 35.4% from three. Now, again, he doesn't take that many threes, but he's still very capable of making them. He's a league average shooter, which means that he does have to keep you honest. And again, as I talked about, that's a very valuable asset for him when he spends a large part of his game on that 3-point line because of the fact that he is facilitating for the whole offense. So him being able to shoot that shot when there's no passing lanes to open up is a very lethal option for the Indiana Pacers. But yeah, Domantas Sabonis, at this point, yearly All-Star, I think, and he's only gonna get better from here on out. Again, another very young player.
Yeah, I mean, again, like you said, the Pacers had a great start to the season. Now they've kind of cooled off since then, but there's no denying they're still a great team. They're still a tough opponent to beat on a nightly basis, and Sabonis is a big part of that, man. Like he's grown into a great all around big man. He can score from the low post. He can stretch it outside. He's a great passer, just like his dad. And on the defensive side of the ball, like you can see he makes a huge impact for the Pacers on that side of the floor as well. So again, although the Pacers aren't as great as they were to begin the year, they should still deserve somebody to represent them in the All-Star game. And I think Sabonis has been playing very well and should be there to represent them there.
Yeah, for sure. The final front court spot that we have for the Eastern Conference bench is, and it might surprise some people considering how we've talked about this guy's team, but we are going to put Julius Randle as our final All-Star front court spot. Now, the New York Knicks are very surprisingly the 6th seed in the Eastern Conference, sporting a 14-15 record, and Julius Randle has been arguably the biggest factor for that success. He's averaging 23.1 points a game, 11 rebounds, 5.6 assists, shooting 47.6 from the field and 40.6% from three. Now, Julius Randle, I think for us, has always been an interesting case. I think we've criticized him a lot. Julius Randle has been one of those guys that he's shown flashes of being just this all-star caliber player, but he's never been able to put together on a consistent basis, whether it's, the scoring, the lack of efficiency, the bad decision making, the subpar defense, being able to figure it out. Now, again, I will preface this by saying this is a contract year for him. So, we've seen what players can do in contract years when there's money involved. Money's a very good motivator for success. But in all seriousness, all credit has to go to Julius Randle. He seems to have taken that next step forward. Obviously, we'll see if he can continue that into next year, where I think a lot of my doubt lies of whether or not he will be able to. But for this year specifically, he definitely makes a great case for an all-star spot. I think I would be putting him in the all-star game, but the numbers speak for themselves, especially the three-point shooting. He's turned himself into a legit three-point shooter this season, and the New York Knicks have been a pretty decent team. They've beat a couple of good teams. We saw them beat the Atlanta Hawks and the Milwaukee Bucks early in the season. So Julius Randle, credit to him, man. He definitely, I think, deserves an all-star spot this year. It'll be interesting to see whether the coaches give it to him, but for us, surprisingly, he's there for us.
Look, Knicks fans, don't say I don't give you anything, because I am still waiting for this team's eventual downfall, because I still think this team isn't going to amount to anything as long as James Dolan is the owner.
Well, Knicks fans will agree with you on that.
But
I think.
But I'll also say your roster construction absolutely is garbage, and But I'll say this, and also hiring Tom Thibodeau. What were you? Okay, when that goes down the drain, I'll be there to rant about that. But we're here to talk about Julius Randle, and he's been great this season, and a lot of it has to do with just him making those improvements in his game. The 3-point shot surprisingly looks very good. Like he hits, like it was a highlight that I was seeing on social media where end of the shot clock, Julius gets the ball at the top, and he could have made a pass inside to get a better look, but he just confidently still stepped up, pulled up for three, and nailed it. And that to me is the biggest sign of him improving, where he can now shoot that shot with confidence. On top of that, he's super athletic. He's also been a great facilitator as well, just being able to move the ball. And yeah, he's been a great spark for the Knicks. And I think looking at the numbers, like Zeeshan and I were kind of looking at all the players who we can put for the potential last front court spot based off of record for now, Knicks fans, and the stats that he's putting up. It makes sense to give him that spot, man. He's been balling out, and yeah, I think he should be rewarded for this, for the success that he's been having on the court.
Yeah. And then that'll move us on to our final two reserves. Now, for our first reserve, we have an agreement on this, and it will be Zach LaVine for our first reserve. Now, Zach LaVine is averaging 28.2 points a game, 5.5 rebounds, 5.2 assists, shooting 51.5% from the field and 43.1% from three, for the Chicago Bulls, who are in the mix for the playoff spot, for the last playoff spot. They're currently the 9th seed right now with a 11-15 record. Now, Zach LaVine for us, I think, has also been another interesting player. Like last year, I think a lot of people had him as an all-star, whereas we did not. And I think it was the usual stuff about his efficiency, his defense. It's just he wasn't there all the way yet. He wasn't able to produce in a way that translated to success for his team. Now, a large part of that had to do with Jim Boylan and his garbage coaching. I remember watching the B-ball breakdown, his video on Jim Boylan and what failed, and it was absolutely atrocious. Like, it was so bad to watch them, and these sets that they would run.
The punch
like
clock.
They would put like Zach LaVine. Yeah, bro, they would put. It would be some weird stuff, man. Like, the sets weren't bad, but they would put all the people in the wrong places, bro. They would put like Zach LaVine in the dunker spot and like Lowry Markkinen at the 3-point line. Like, it was terrible to watch, man, for real. But yeah, Zach LaVine, I think for us was not an all-star last year, but for us this year, I think he's cemented his spot as an all-star. He seems to have taken that next step. Now his decision making is a lot better. He's able to facilitate a lot more. I think one criticism that a lot of people had of him was that he wasn't able to produce how he wanted to against better teams. Now he's being able to do that on a more consistent basis. And again, as I said, his efficiency is up too. Last year, he's shooting 45%. This year, he's shooting 51.5%. So his efficiency has jumped up significantly this year. So Zach LaVine takes our final spot, or our second last spot for the All-Star team.
Yeah, I haven't actually been following Zach LaVine this season, so for me, when I looked at his numbers, obviously the numbers look great to me, but I had to actually see it with my own eyes, and I watched some of his highlights before the episode, and the biggest thing to me that I see with the difference between last year's Zach LaVine and this year, the 3-point shooting. The 3-point shooting is just far better than it has been. Like, he was always one of those like mid-range shooters, the guy who would only take mid-range fadeaways, that kind of thing. But this year, pretty much bad and inefficient shots, and it really stunted the offense. Also, Jim Boylan was a major factor in that for the Chicago Bulls. But I think this year you're seeing that the 3-point shot just looks a lot better. He's far comfortable shooting it, and it's really just opened up his game, and he's taking smarter shots because of it, and again, another thing I did notice was the playmaking as well. He's making better decisions on the court. He's getting his teammates involved. His one criticism is defense. Defense is still not a thing with Zach LaVine, but offensively you can see the growth in his game, and I think because the Bulls are in the cusp of a playoff spot, and they've been far better than they were last season, and I think LaVine should definitely be rewarded for that.
I mean, even his defense too, he's been a bit better on that side of the ball in terms of he's actually trying a bit more now, which I respect. So overall, just Zach LaVine's been a much better player. I don't think the stats will show that he's been a significantly improved player. But for us, in terms of how we look at the game, he looks a lot better for me personally than he did last year. And that moves us on to our final reserve spot. Now, this is where me and Hani had a difference of opinion, as I said, and we each chose two different players. It's kind of cheating that we're putting two players as our final spot because I think we both to some extent agree that these guys can be all stars. But
Well, I disagree with yours.
well, I don't think that should be a disagreement. But for my all-star candidate to round out the all-star team, I have Ben Simmons. And he's averaging right now 15.2 points a game, 8.3 rebounds, 8 assists.
Hey, those sound familiar.
6% from the field. Now, Ben Simmons, of course, is on the Philadelphia 76ers, who are currently the first seed in the Eastern Conference. Hani, on the other hand, has Fred VanVleet as his final All-Star reserve, who is averaging 19.9 points a game, 6.6 assists, shooting 41.1% from the field, and 37.5% from three. Of course, unfortunately, the Raptors are only the 7th seed in the East, which is good compared to what we were at in the beginning of the season and how we were looking in the beginning of the season.
Hey man, so, we're like a game or a game and a half behind, back from the 4th seed. So
we've clawed our way out for sure. We've clawed our way out. But I'll let Hani go about Fred VanVleet. But for me personally, Ben Simmons, again, we were kind of critical of him in a couple of episodes ago. But since then, after the first was the 10 or so games, 10, 15 games, Ben Simmons has really started to increase his production. Last game without Joel Embiid, he dropped 42 points, a career high. It seems like he's kind of starting to figure his way out in Doc Rivers' offense a bit more. And Ben Simmons, again, he's not our favorite player. We kind of criticize him a lot, especially in the playoffs. But again, the All-Star regular season award. And Ben Simmons, he's a triple-double machine. He does a lot of things that won't show up on the stat sheet, and then on top of that, even if his offense has some holes in it, defensively, I think I said this a couple episodes ago as well, he has a case to be the league's best defender. So Ben Simmons, again, it's kind of surprising coming from me, but I think it's also a customary thing to have the first seed of the conference have like 2 All-Stars, which is why I think also part of the reason why I'm having Ben Simmons in the lineup. But Ben Simmons, again, criticisms, we have our criticisms of him, but you can't deny the talent that he is, and especially his work that he does, some of the facilitating stuff that he does on the offensive end, some of the little stuff that he does on the offensive end, and then, of course, his, perennial all-defensive team efforts on the defensive end of the ball.
Look, I can see what the fascination with Ben Simmons, but it comes back to my point where he's still the same player that he was, and I think, to me, if you're putting up 15 points a game, it's not really all-star worthy unless you're making a dramatic impact on your team. And yeah, sure, Simmons is great, but I think Embiid is the bigger catalyst for the Sixers. So I decided to go on the different route, and I went with Fred VanVleet, who I think has been absolutely fantastic for the Raptors this season. One of the biggest bright spots for this team, and what has been a pretty disappointing year overall for the Raptors. But even tonight, when watching Fred VanVleet go off tonight just shows how great he is. He improved his mid-range game. He's a great 3-point shooter. Smart player with the basketball. Oh, just a great leader overall. And I think he's taking the next step in his game, man. He's literally Kyle Lowry 2.0, man. He's the same makeup as Kyle Lowry, and it shows, man. And I think the Raptors, just being in the position that they're in, being in a playoff picture, they still have one of the best point differentials in the league, despite having a sub 500 record, which still shows that this is still a good team that is producing. Just the wins just have been difficult to come by. but I think the Raptors should still have a representative, that makes the All-Star team, and I think it should be Fred VanVleet. I think out of all the Raptors star players, Fred has been the most consistent, and he's been, in my opinion, the best overall this season. So yeah, I'm gonna give it to Fred VanVleet. I think he deserves it for sure.
Yeah, if there's a representative for the Raptors, I think Fred VanVleet's probably the first option, because of the fact that, again, Pascal had that rough start to the season. Kyle's been in and out of games, but Fred VanVleet's being the most consistent out of the three. Now, my issue, I think, is me kind of being a mad Raptors fan, right? Where I've kind of been pissed off with this team a lot. And again, it's not just because of the fact that they, the production isn't what I've hoped, because of the fact that at the end of the day, you can't really control the talent, and the Raptors had a massive talent drop off with Marc Gasol and Serge Ibaka leaving. The problems I've had with the Raptors are a lot of their own mistakes, and the mental mistakes that they've had, especially for a team that's full of like veterans. I've had a huge problem with that. Fred VanVleet himself, like, he's been good, don't get me wrong, but he's had a couple of rough games here and there. He's a good defender, but he's had a couple of games where kind of drifted off on defense. His finishing, and unfortunately, I don't think he'll ever be a great finisher just because his height. That's the one difference between him and Kyle Lowry. Kyle Lowry's substantially more athletic than Fred VanVleet is. I don't think people understand how much more athletic Kyle Lowry is and how much athleticism he truly has to be able to produce and to play the game the way he does at a 6-foot height. But Fred VanVleet, I don't think will ever be a great defender. He's still not a great finisher. He's still not a very good finisher. I think that's the one hole on offense. And again, as I said, his consistency and just the fact that, I think for me, he's a very good player. But in terms of the All-Star team, I think you have to be a great player, at least in one aspect or one spot on the court, which is why I have Ben Simmons, especially the fact, again, Philadelphia is the first seed in the East. And Ben Simmons, you can say he has some holes on offense, but his defense is at the top of the league. So for me, I think that warrants him an All-Star selection over Fred VanVleet.
Well, I'll say this about Fred. His finishing has definitely improved this season. Like, there's some of those layups, where he puts a little bit that nice finish on it. So he's definitely gotten better, but I do get it. He's not as athletic as Kyle Lowry, but I think overall, also defensively, the work that he puts in when he's engaged defensively is some of the best from the guard position from a guy of his size. So this all comes down to personal preference and who we think deserve to be All-Stars. So you're going with Ben Simmons. I think it's Fred, but who really knows? We're not going to know until it's officially the All-Stars are officially announced. But those were our official picks for the actual All-Stars. Let us know what you guys think. Do you agree or disagree? But we're also going to quickly cover some of the All-Star snubs. For the sake of time, we're not going to really dive too deep into them. First one is Tobias Harris. Obviously, the Sixers have been great this season. Tobias Harris has been a big part of it. He's had a lot better season than he's had last season, and really starting to make up that big contract that he's been offered by the Sixers.
I think interestingly, before you go to our next guy, we kind of saw this coming because of the fact that he did have his best seasons with Doc Rivers, and now that he's back with Doc Rivers, right now he can produce in the Doc Rivers system. And Tobias Harris has always been a guy that can go out and get you 25 a night. It's just been about the consistency. And now with Doc Rivers, he's showing that a bit more. So that's a large part of the reason why the 76ers are in the top spot in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah. The next one is Chris Middleton. And I think tonight really kind of solidified why we didn't put him as an All-Star. And I think with Chris Middleton, it's just that the numbers just really aren't there. We know Chris Middleton's a solid player. He's a good defender. He's a great three-point shooter. But I think with Chris is that he sometimes disappears, or he's very easy to stop. Like tonight against the Raptors was very apparent, where he just couldn't get anything going. And I think that was kind of a big reason why. And his numbers just weren't as great as some of the other players, some of the other guards we were able to bring up. So yeah, Chris Middleton definitely would be a player that's considered a snub, especially because the Bucks are doing that great.
I think Chris Middleton will always be one of those fringe guys who can maybe make it if he produces good, or will perhaps miss it. I think he'll be one of those fringe guys in his career.
Yeah. The next one, Malcolm Brogdon. Now, this one is a little more unlikely just based on the fact that there's a lot of guards in the Eastern Conference who are talented. And Brogdon, although he's been great for the Pacers, um, it would have been tough to see him get selected for the All-Star game unless the coaches would put him in. But yeah, Malcolm Brogdon would definitely be considered a snub, especially considering how good he is for the Pacers this season.
Mm-hmm.
Next one is Gordon Hayward. Gordon Hayward, I mean, the Hornets have been surprisingly good this season. And again, we've talked about Gordon Hayward on his reemergence, the fact that now he's in a situation where he can get the ball more and he can be able to do some of the things that he was doing back in his Utah days. But I think for Charlotte, it comes down to winning, and they're not as a consistent team as some of the other teams in the East. So I think it's difficult for Gordon to get selected for the All-Star game.
Yeah, I think it'll be difficult for him to get in, but he's definitely having an All-Star worthy campaign. Yeah. And he's been great for the Charlotte Hornets, who have been surprisingly pretty decent. And I think you're seeing the type of the dynamicism, I don't know if that's a word or not, of his game, in terms of the fact that he can do pretty much everything on the court that you want from him to do. And also that veteran leadership that he gives to the Charlotte Hornets. So shout out Gordon Hayward, man. He's having a great season.
Yeah. Next couple of snubs from the Raptors. We just mentioned them, Pascal Siakam and Kyle Lowry. It's been kind of a down year. It's been a slow start for Pascal, but he's slowly been able to come back to life. And I think he gets a lot of unfair criticism, especially when he missed a couple of game winners that completely rimmed out. I knocked that out to dumb luck, but I think what you're noticing with Pascal is he's still growing as a player. He's still developing, and I think the more he's put into these situations, I think the better he's going to become. But this season, the slow start didn't really help his case with being an All-Star. And Kyle Lowry, he's just gotten to that point where he's older now, and he's still a fantastic player, one of the best guards in the East, but injuries has kind of made it so he hasn't played as many games, and there's just other players who have been performing a lot better than Kyle has this season.
I think for Kyle Lowry especially too, he was kind of a All-Star selection because of the fact that the Raptors were doing so well for a number of seasons, and he was, arguably the most important part of the Raptors' success. But unfortunately this year, with the Raptors' lack of success, now the All-Star nomination for Kyle Lowry, I think, goes out the window for a lot of people.
Yeah. In a similar situation is actually our next couple is Bam Adebayo and Jimmy Butler. It's mainly because of the fact that the Heat have just, deeply underperformed this season. Like they haven't been able to put it together. They got hit with the COVID protocol. Jimmy Butler has been in and out of the lineup. Like Jimmy's only played like 15 games, this season, and it's they're still putting up their numbers. Like Jimmy's averaging like 19, 7 and 7, I think, and Bam is 19 and 8. But you still are seeing the fact that the winning has to be there, and I think I just don't know how I justify putting a guy of Bam Adebayo above a guy like Julius Randle when Julius is putting up better numbers and his team is in a better position in the standings. So it's just one of those situations for the Miami Heat this season, and that finals hangover is definitely real this season for them. Another player who I'm guaranteeing you we're gonna get a lot of blowback with this one. It's Trae Young, and we've been critical of Trae Young and his game and how we feel it's not as great as people deem it to be. Granted, he's putting up great numbers like he's done in the past couple of years, but I think with Trae is that his team has been very fluctuative. There are stretches where they're performing well, they're winning games, and there's stretches where they just lose a bunch of games, and sometimes Trae is a big part of it, and I think, I think for me in particular, I've noticed reasons why I've kind of been negative toward this game, and it's just that it's a very soft game that he plays, and it's not, to me, a very sustainable game, a game that would lead to consistent winning, winning some of these, and I think that's something that he's gonna have to work on in particular. But
Yeah, they are the 11th seed right now, which is not great.
yeah,
And the Hawks have looked not they haven't performed up to the standard I think that they wanted to. Trae Young is still being putting up the numbers that he usually does, but again, when you're talking about the fact that he's one of the worst defenders in the league, he kind of has to perform amazing on the offensive end for him to garner that All-Star selection. And unfortunately, it's just it hasn't been all the way there this season. I think again they are figuring a lot of stuff out with the new roster, but for us, all of this stuff that's happening in Atlanta and Trae Young, I think for us just it wasn't good enough for us, especially given who's ahead of him
yeah,
in the All-Star
that's
on the
who I was
All-Star
gonna
team.
bring up. Was that they're just players that are performing just as good as Trae Young, but their teams are doing far better. So yeah, Trae Young is gonna be considered a snub. Like it or hate it, but that's how we're judging it in this one. Next up is Nikola Vucevic. Now you kind of just feel bad for Nikola Vucevic because he puts up great numbers when he's not guarded by Marcus Hall, and or Aaron Baines for whatever reason he didn't really like being guarded by
I think
Baines.
it's just a Raptors jersey, bro. It's a
Maybe
Raptors.
maybe it's the red, but Nikola Vucevic putting up some great numbers, but his team in Orlando has done him no favors. It also doesn't help that Jonathan Isaac, their best player, is injured. Markelle Fultz, one of their better players, is also injured for the season. So
Aaron Gordon is out.
Aaron
Cole
Gordon,
Anthony is out.
like that entire team is decimated. So yeah, it's very unlikely that he's gonna make it in, especially when you're considering that he's going up against guys like Sabonis, Embiid, Julius Randle. So it's tough for Vucevic to make it in there. And finally, sorry, you want?
Yeah, I feel I definitely feel bad for Nikola Vucevic. He's definitely one of my favorite players, but I mean, I think he just needs to get over Lando, man.
Yeah.
If the Raptors could somehow get him, I think that would be a miracle, considering that's exactly what we need. But that's not gonna happen with this contract.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Nikola Vucevic's team just sucks. They haven't done him any favors. They're pretty much, except for him, everyone else is out. So yeah, Nikola Vucevic won't get in, but I think he definitely he's very underrated. I think a lot of NBA fans should be paying attention to what he does a lot more. Especially, I think this is probably, from what I've seen, his best season to date.
Yeah. And finally, the last player who's had a great season, and we brought him up in a couple of episodes. It's been Jeremy Grant. The problem is he plays for the Detroit Pistons, and the Detroit Pistons are absolutely garbage.
Pretty much, that sums it up.
I mean, Jeremy's been great, but his team, you just can't. Like, if your team is being that bad, like, it's very difficult to be an all-star. Ask Bradley Beal, he knows from experience. But with that, those were our picks for our all-stars and our snubs. Definitely let us know what you guys think. Do you agree or disagree? Who do you predict to be Eastern Conference all-stars this year? Definitely let us know on social media or the comment section on YouTube. And finally, it's been a bit of a longer episode, but hope you guys stick with us. But we're gonna move on to the up and under segment for this week. There's a bit of news to cover. First off, are you up or under on the NBA planning a dunk contest before the All-Star game, and they want to do a 3-point and skills contest at the halftime of the All-Star game? So they're basically trying to condense All-Star weekend all into one night.
Again, we've talked about this before in a couple of episodes past as well, but I think for both of us, we can both say we're under on this. We did not want to have an All-Star game, All-Star weekend to begin with. None of the players have wanted to do that. It's a terrible idea. We're not gonna go into it again. We've talked about it to death, but it's a terrible idea for a number of reasons. Especially the fact that, again, we talked about last episode, none of the players want to do it. So bro, without fans, all this other stuff that's going on, none of the players want to do it, and then you're trying to cram everything into one night. Bro, it's terrible, bro. It should not happen, man.
Yeah, it seems like a big money ploy by the NBA.
Money makes the world go around.
I mean, but the fact that they're trying to really, really push for this is uncharacteristic for the NBA to do it, especially when their players are vocally, voicing their displeasure with this idea.
I think you pretty much nailed it, right? It's very uncharacteristic of the NBA, especially when the other leagues have all canceled their All-Star weekends. or in the case of NFL, the Pro Bowl weekend, whatever, all their All-Star games have been
Or
canceled.
even the
And
NHL, they're
the
not doing it.
yeah, exactly. The NBA is usually the most progressive league out of the big four North American leagues, right? So it's very interesting to see that the NBA is kind of the one that's taken the step back on this one, right? So,
Yeah.
I mean, it looks like it's gonna happen nonetheless, and I guess the players will just have to deal with it. I guess. Next up, are you up or under on the Blake Griffin situation? So the Detroit Pistons have pretty much just held him out of games, and they've said that he's either going to be traded or bought out. Now, reportedly, his first suitor on the market is the LA Lakers if he is bought out.
I'm up on it for Blake Griffin's perspective and for the Detroit Pistons. I think it's been a bit of a failed experiment for the Detroit Pistons. Like, they tried to trade for Blake in the hopes that they can maybe garner some more interest, maybe get some free agent, interest. People wanting to play with Blake, and it's just completely backfired. The Pistons have been pretty garbage, and they want to rebuild, and I don't blame them. And I think moving on for Blake Griffin is definitely the smart thing to do. Now, it's going to be very difficult to trade his contract. I think he has like 50 plus,
like
60 million.
I swear it's like 70 or something.
Oh,
like that.
it's owed to him over the next 2 years, and I think that's gonna be very difficult. There's gonna be talks of maybe a buyout, and if so, a lot of teams are gonna still be interested. I think Blake is no longer the same player he once was. That's been pretty obvious this season, but he's still a skilled player, skilled big, and I think a team like the Lakers, it would actually be kind of great for not only Blake but the Lakers, because the Lakers can get someone to replace Anthony Davis while he's hurt, and Blake can get to compete for a title. So, and he goes back to LA. So
yeah, he can play his ideal role, I think, at this stage in his career off the bench, and help a contending team, as you said. So, Detroit Pistons will definitely have to swallow a large chunk of money on this one. It'll be tough for them.
yeah,
but that's what Tom Gore signed off on.
I mean,
traded.
At least it gives them a sense of direction now that, hey, we're moving off of this guy and we're going on for the rebuild. So I'll credit the Pistons on that one.
Shout out to Sadiq Bey. Also,
yeah, Sadiq Bey's been balling, man.
Bro, this guy went off against the Celtics, man.
Eastern Conference Player of the Week.
He's a beast, bro. Sadiq Bey, oh my god, I did not expect him to be this good, but he's a beast. Shout out to Sadiq Bey.
Yeah, he was good. Speaking of former Detroit Pistons, next up, are you up or under? And Andre Drummond is also reportedly on the trading block. The Cavs have basically said, hey, we're going to sit you until we work out a trade for you. And reportedly, the Raptors have actually had discussions surrounding him with the Cavaliers.
No, I'm up on it from the Cavs' point of view. I think I'm up on it from Andre Drummond's point of view, because it's just they need to split up. It's not a viable situation for either of them. In terms of the Cavs need to rebuild, Andre Drummond just needs to go to another team. In terms of the Raptors having discussions for him, I think a lot of Raptors fans are up on that. I think I will go on the under route because of the fact that low-key, not to be like rude or anything, but Andre Drummond kind of sucks. Like, if we're being honest, right? He puts up a lot of empty stats. Now, the rebounding, I think, would definitely help the Raptors, considering they've been trash at rebounding since, I don't know how many years it's been at this point. They've been pretty bad.
Yeah, since JV left.
And, I mean, with JV, they weren't a great rebounding team either. But, like, the rebounding would definitely help. But, again, you can ask Pistons fans, you can ask Cavs fans how they feel about Andre Drummond, and the overwhelming response is definitely negative in terms of the fact that, he just doesn't warrant the type of contract he wants. He doesn't warrant the type of role that he wants. And I think that's the biggest point for Andre Drummond throughout his career. If he was able to just accept a lesser role and do what he's best at, then I think a lot of teams would be interested in him. But, unfortunately, he kind of wants to do more than what he's capable of doing. And, I don't think I really want him, especially given what we would have to give up for him. Even if it is a 3-team trade and somebody else can, match the salary for Andre Drummond, we would still have to give up somebody significant from our rotation. So, I'm under on it.
I mean, unless he gets bought out, if I'm the Raptors, I wouldn't go after Drummond just because he's too expensive, man. That's $29 million that you got to match in salary for a team that's already above the cap, and we're not trading Lowry, we're not trading Siakam, not trading VanVleet, not trading
I'm
OG.
in, man.
OG's untradeable for me at this point. Yeah, I don't care what offer I'm getting. I'm not trading this guy. But yeah, it's just too much. Trade for a guy who, like you said, puts up a lot of empty stats and is a pretty one-dimensional player in the stage of his career.
Yeah, now reportedly, apparently, if he does get bought out, I think the Nets, the Celtics,
Bro, don't go to Brooklyn, man. We don't need more players going to Brooklyn.
well, not Brooklyn, not Boston, please, none of those teams. But yeah, there have been a couple of teams that are already inquiring about Andre Drummond. Should he get bought out? So it'll definitely be interesting to see what team he goes to. Speaking of the Andre Drummond situation, Draymond Green the other night in his press conference called out the NBA for its double standard. When it comes to the treatment of players, for example, who are on the trading block or who want to be traded. So definitely check out that tangent that you went on if you guys haven't already, because it was green thing to do, and it was definitely a very interesting set of points that he was making. So are you up or under on Draymond Green's whole spiel about it?
I mean, I gotta be a little bit. I'm kind of in between. I'm in between on what he said. So there's definitely an imbalance of power between what a team does and what a player dictates as far as their future and what they want to do with player movement. But it's either or. It's either the team has a full control, they can tell the player where to go and how they want to do it, or the players in the NBA in particular has full control and can literally dictate exactly where they want to go.
James Harden.
Yeah, and James Harden's situation was the perfect example. Like Draymond brought that up in his little rant that he went on, and I disagreed. I was like, look, James Harden, if he wanted to go, just wanted to be traded from Houston, Houston could have worked out a trade with anybody. But he wanted to go.
Draymond Green did say he dogged it. Right?
Look,
like he didn't make any excuses for James Harden.
But look, at the end of the day, James Harden wanted to go to one destination, which was the Brooklyn Nets, and
or two.
Sure, Philly was another one, but he wanted to go to one or maybe two destinations. That's it, and he put the Houston Rockets in a very tough situation where they had to work very hard to get a solid return for him, and they couldn't explore other options because other teams were like, look, if we trade for this guy, he might not want to be here too, and he might ask out again. So I definitely think it's a double standard, and I think maybe owners shouldn't tell players that, hey, we're moving you. Sorry, but at the end of the day, the owners do pay, and the organization do pay your checks, so you kind of have to do what they say. But I think it should be more of a collaborative process where the player and the team need to work together to find the best solution for both parties, because I think it's just gotten out of hand in the NBA where stars are just either leaving or teams are moving guys, or it's either or. But I think the stars are definitely been the more problematic situation in recent years.
I think this is always a dynamic discussion that we have. We've had it a number of times. I think it's going to continue, especially in the quote unquote player empowerment era. There's benefits and cons to both sides. I think both perspectives. I think one thing I will agree with him on is the stuff that he brought up about the mental toll it takes on players, right? Especially if the NBA is advocating their whole mental health stance, right? And going for that whole optics, for all those optics in terms of the whole mental health point of view. If the NBA is trying to advocate that side of things, the mental toll it takes on players, especially in for example Andre Drummond situation. I can definitely see what Draymond Green is saying, especially when you take into account and a lot of people don't think about this, but players have to move their kids in and out of school. A lot of families have to move houses, have to do this, that, and I think some of it has to be taken into account when you sign up for the job, right? Because it is a very dynamic job. But I think it's a very tough discussion to
Yeah.
be had, and there's a lot of valid points I think to both sides of things.
Yeah, we
to
frankly
both perspectives.
need a lot more time to talk about this because this is just not enough time right now to talk about it. But it's definitely an ongoing discussion that needs to be addressed in some shape or form. But yeah, finally, are you up or under on the Brooklyn Nets signing Andre Roberson? He was recently waived apparently by the Oklahoma City Thunder. I didn't even know he was waived.
Neither did I.
I didn't even know either. But yeah, the Nets
Wait,
were.
was he waived or was he a free agent?
He might have been a free agent. I could be
He was
wrong.
a free agent.
Yeah, I heard somewhere that he was waived, but I could be wrong
No, I
there.
think he was a free agent.
Yeah, but the Nets also waived Norvel Pell, center, to make room to sign Roberson. So are you up or under on the Roberson signing?
I'm up on it from the Brooklyn Nets point of view. It's a low risk, high reward kind of thing in terms of, just a couple of years ago, Andre Roberson was a top defender of the league. Fortunately, injuries kind of killed that. But, if he can contribute to them, in whatever limited role they give him, that would be good for them. Now, in terms of the rest of the league, I'm under on it because I don't want Brooklyn to get any more help. I don't want them to win. I'm sorry.
How much more do you need?
But,
That's my question.
Speaking of Norvel Pelt, I've actually watched him quite a bit for the past couple of years or whatever, however long he's been on Philly, because obviously being in the same division, the Atlantic Division, the Toronto Raptors and Philadelphia 76ers, I've gone to watch Norvel Pelt quite a bit. I really like his game. I'm surprised Brooklyn didn't utilize him as much as they did. Now, a lot of people may be asking who. Again, he is more of a end of the bench kind of player, but for the Raptors, who we kind of need some center depth, hey, like if we can't get anybody else, man, like I kind of like Norvel Pell in terms of like he's a nice defender, he's a good, nice rebounder, a lob threat. So honestly, yeah, if I was Masai Ujiri, Bobby Webster, I'd be looking into Norvel Pell to be honest, as a low budget move.
Yeah, I mean we're gonna have to see what Bobby and Masai do, but yeah, man, I don't know how many players Brooklyn really needs, man, but sure, take Andre Roberson, and hey, well, take Andre Drummond too at that point, and hey, you know what? Why don't you add Blake Griffin while you're at it too? Just because you wanna create the ultimate super team, so you don't have to work for a championship ever again. I'm done with these super teams, man. Too old for this shit.
Unfortunately, parity lasted like one season.
COVID killed parity, man. Can't believe it. But yeah, man, with that concludes this week's episode. We hope you guys enjoyed it. It was a bit of a longer one, but definitely subscribe to the show for on all the various podcasting platforms. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher Radio. Basically, wherever you can find a podcast, you can find us with the Up and Under Podcast. Also, check us out on social media, Twitter and Instagram at @N_Under Podcast, Facebook.com/Up and Under Podcast for all the latest updates whenever we post a new episode or a reaction to news when they occur. Also, check out our website, upandunderpodcast.com. It's our central hub for the show. It's also a place where we write blog posts about every single episode. So if you don't have to listen to the full thing, you can also read about it as well. So definitely check that out if you haven't done so. And yeah, man. So the All-Star break is very soon, and then on top of that, it's going to be the trade deadline. So definitely still a lot of craziness going to happen in the NBA. So we'll keep you guys updated as the news keeps coming through. So yeah. With that concludes this week's episode. See you guys on the next one. Take it easy.
Easy.